All right, we're about a minute past, so I'll go ahead and get started. Some people just coming in, and they can join as we go. So today we're talking about distributed fulfillment and really why it matters now more than ever. My name is Travis Mariea. I'm the CEO of Flxpoint. We are a distributed inventory and order management system, and we're hosting this webinar today. So first off, a quick agenda. We're really going to kick off with how changes in retail are really changing the supply chain. How that, not only in the recent couple of weeks and months with COVID-19, but just in general, how retail is changing and the differences we're seeing there. We're going to talk a little bit more about, obviously, what distributed fulfillment is and why it's affected by this change in retail. Who does it affect, right, from all sides of the supply chain and even to the consumer. What to consider before implementing a strategy. If you decide distributed fulfillment is a strategy for you, what to think about, and then how to evaluate and implement this kind of strategy. Obviously, we'll end it with a Q&A. I'll go ahead and start my video as well. All right, so talking about the change in retail and what we're seeing, in the era of e-commerce and Amazon, retailers specifically, right? This affects both the brand and the retailer side, but specifically retailers have been forced to significantly increase their catalog size and support fast, often free shipping to stay competitive. So any of those retailing now today know that this is very much part of the Amazon era and just e-commerce in general, where you're a back button away from losing a customer. You don't have someone just walking by and a captive audience from a brick and mortar. So you really do need to stay competitive with quick, free shipping or cheap shipping at least, and a large catalog, having the right size, the right color, all of that factored in. So you're not losing that customer because they'll just go to Amazon or another site that might have the same product as you if you're retailing, obviously, different brands. So what we've seen from retailers is to try to combat this, they're looking to increase their catalog size. The biggest challenge with that is increased inventory risk and warehouse costs, right? It sounds great. Let's increase our catalog so we have more sizes and colors that people want. Obviously, you take on that large inventory risk when you're buying in the traditional wholesale model and the storage costs and all of that. Supporting 2 to 5 day fulfillment, it's so easy for Amazon to do, right? And doing it in a cheap fashion. It seems it's great when you're a multi-billion-dollar company. Obviously, for our retailers out there that we work with, this is a struggle and figuring out how to compete in this era where 2 to 5 day shipping is basically required for a customer to check out or expected. So factoring those warehouse wages, shipping costs, things like that, and the challenge that go along with that. And then kind of something that goes with this is not really talked about as much is offering these trendy niche brands that you might not be able to find on Amazon, right? Or just in general, the change in a lot of the buying habits of, whether it's millennials or, any real generation that's kind of starting to look more at, what can I get from your site as a retailer that's not available on, the Walmart and the Amazons of the world that's, basically a commodity purchase. So, how do you offer these trendy, smaller brands? How do you deal with the increase of vendor onboarding and just kind of managing more of that, larger catalog of smaller vendors that you're working with? So these are all kind of macroeconomic changes we're seeing given Amazon's push and what is expected from the consumer, as well as just e-commerce in general becoming a larger piece of the retail world. So speaking of that, total retail sales in general on the left here, you can see, we all know it's increasing from an e-commerce perspective, but you can see here on the left, retail sales in general is 4 to 5% kind of increase over the last couple of years, expected to stay up like that through 2023. So, retail in general is increasing and staying consistent in that increase. You can see here on the right that e-commerce is a big portion of well, at least a small portion now, but growing into a bigger and bigger portion as each year goes by. Getting past that 20% mark here in 2023. It might feel like everyone shops online, but seeing that it's, really we're sub 20% still can show you just the growth opportunity and the change that we're going to see in not only how people shop, but how online retailers and brands work together from a supply chain perspective, but also go to market and interact with their consumers. I got this, I've seen people share this through LinkedIn a couple of times, and it looks like Bank of America and the U.S. Department of Commerce did a quick study just in the recent couple months with COVID-19, the pandemic we're seeing across the world. This is just U.S. e-commerce penetration, but you can see very quickly that we predicted around that 16%, or we're averaging around that 16% on that last graph, right? About 14 to 16 in 2019, 2020. You can see that we shot straight up into 27, jumping at full 10% in just the last few weeks, given everyone, staying at home, shopping online, not really going, obviously, to the malls are shut down, the department stores, just about everything was shut down there for a couple of weeks. Things are starting to open back up, and we're obviously going to see, people start to shop more in physical locations. But, these numbers that we looked at in the previous slide could probably be looked at conservative now. There's been a lot of talk about how retail and online e-commerce is really going to be accelerated given this, and given the change in behavior we've seen, and people kind of, being propelled into online shopping that might not have given the pandemic. So, just something to kind of take there and think about that. It's most likely already an aggressive path for retail to gain market share of the overall retail, market, but e-commerce gaining even more so just because of the COVID-19 side of things. So with that, we can expect that there's going to be a change in how we do business, given that online e-commerce has only been a small piece of retail, 10 to 15% over the last couple of years, right? You're really required to keep a lot of your in-house inventory, or your inventory in-house in a brick and mortar, because, a good portion of your business for a lot of retailers was brick and mortar, and still is, right? So the whole retail software landscape, the retail market has been built around this traditional supply chain. And we've got that here on the left, where, the traditional supply chain is a brand or a wholesaler who's buying in bulk, or who's selling in bulk freight to a brick and mortar location traditionally, right? Who's then selling on to a consumer via local foot traffic, right? So that brick and mortar retailer, they're buying quarterly, monthly, whatever it might be, packs and cases of inventory. Very simple, kind of slow process, doesn't have to be very quick, because they're just stocking up inventory, every so often, right? That's been that traditional supply chain, and what we're used to, and what we see a lot of still today, because there's, we're still, like you saw earlier, still, even in the COVID pandemic, we're still sub 30% of sales online. With that, distributed fulfillment, right? What we're talking about today, you may have heard of distributed order management. I mean, it's basically the same thing. I like to refer to as distributed fulfillment as the strategy behind, really sourcing inventory from multiple different locations. You do need distributed order management to kind of manage that, but the strategy of taking individual orders to be shipped after purchase from multiple locations, from multiple different parties as well, right? So traditionally, you're going to have your own internal warehouse where you're going to ship out of. Looking at an online retailer here, right? So you may have a brick and mortar, but let's say this retailer has an online presence. I'm mostly talking about a purchase and a sale that's happening online. When that does happen, shipping individually from your internal warehouse, that's still very traditional, but really shipping from multiple different parties in different locations. Now also, e-commerce enabling your brick and mortar location, which you hear about, e-commerce enabling warehouses and brick and mortars. That's really the ability to ship out individual orders in an e-commerce fashion to a consumer, right? So not only doing that from your internal warehouse, from your brick and mortar, now the rise of third-party warehouses to strategically place your products, whether it's in new markets, internationally, on other sides of the United States, if you're a US seller, for quicker shipping, but the rise of third-party warehousing, which I'll talk more about. And then the big thing that we see is obviously on the rise, and something that we're very much in the in this space, is the drop shipping side as well. The brand and the wholesaler keeping their inventory, their ownership of it, and selling it after your retailer sale, and selling on behalf, basically shipping on behalf of you directly to the consumer, right? So all of those pieces make up distributed fulfillment and the strategy. We can talk about, some of that may make sense or may not for your individual business. So we'll get into that. I see some questions. Please ask questions as we go. There's a good one already in here. I'm going to hit them all at the end. Yeah, please, as you think of them, definitely put them in the chat there. So the components of distributed fulfillment and the strategy, right? So there's really three that we'll talk about today, and really three in the strategy, if you ask me. There's some literature out there, and definitely encourage people to go look into it. Search distributed order management. That's what you're going to find mostly around. But really, I look at third-party logistics and warehouses, drop shipping fulfillment model, and implementing that model, and then the ship from store and the, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the acronym, but the buy online, pick up in store strategy as well. So, it's one is really kind of leveraging third-party logistics. One is leveraging your partners, in the dropship side in the middle here. And then one is leveraging your own brick and mortar if you do have one. And it's really about leveraging those to compete with the Amazons of the world and larger retailers of the world, and to kind of really deliver on what consumers are expecting nowadays. So to start with third-party logistics, kind of some of the benefits of leveraging them, right? Empowers retailers and brands. So, both retailers and brands can really leverage a 3PL for quicker and more efficient shipping, right? That's obviously right out the gate. If you have one warehouse or you don't have any warehouses, you don't take that approach of wanting to warehouse, or you got past what you're able to do out of your garage, right? For a smaller growing company, leveraging that third party to actually be able to ship quickly and have 2 to 3 day shipping in all the United States or whatever it might be is a huge piece of that. I talked about it a little bit earlier on the slide earlier about entering different markets as well, right? You might have US covered, but you might want to enter Europe or whatever it might be. So third parties are great for that. It also, one of the trends we see here is it allows brands to ship direct versus sell through distributors, right? So a lot of times brands leverage distributors in the traditional supply chain. I didn't put a distributor in there, but a lot of times they are in between, but more so in the past, not as much lately because of the rise of third-party logistics and warehouses. Brands, as they hit a certain order volume, it can make sense for them to put their inventory in a third party, and they don't have to worry about selling it to a distributor that has a whole different model of buying the inventory, taking a cut, doing, in some cases, buybacks or whatever it might be if they can't sell through. Allowing the brand to have more control and power over their brand, right? Not worrying about who the distributor is selling to. They own the relationship with the end reseller or retailer. That's a big thing that brands have seen. And that's really the rise of the direct-to-consumer brand movement, is because of the rise of third-party logistics among social media and different things, right? And then lastly, it enables more brands to offer dropshipping fulfillment to their retail partners. So if you're a brand and you've got Amazon really, or you've got, they're more FBA obviously, and they're going to want you to use their 3PL. But, if you've got different companies that are working with you, retail partners that say, hey, we want to work with you, like a Home Depot, but we'd love to test you out by dropshipping first, and then we can potentially bring you in full in-house, right? It now enables you to not only sell direct to consumer, but get your foot in the door with other retailers as well. So something to think about there too. And dropshipping fulfillment, right? That's that model in general. I'm sure many of you heard of it. There's a lot of different misconceptions out there. Hopefully I'll talk more about how dropshipping is a fulfillment model, right? It's not, buying stuff from China and flipping it in the US. I think, a lot of you probably understand that, but we still see it every day. It really, what the main thing it does, it empowers retailers to expand their product catalog without inventory risk. So that is one of the first points I made in this Amazon and e-commerce era. That is really a huge differentiator on those that can offer a larger catalog, can acquire more customers more efficiently, right? Through search, through Google shopping ads, whatever it might be, you're gonna be able to acquire more customers. And then we all know the game on online retail is acquiring the customers as cheap as possible, and then increasing the average order volume, or really the customer lifetime value. So dropshipping allows you to do that, allows you to not only retailers to expand their catalog, but even brands. I've seen manufacturers and brands of products who leverage other brands to just get the traffic to their site in the first place, right? Whether it's complementary, or I've even seen competing products. I know a kayak company who sold other kayaks, initially to get off the ground, to just start showing up, right? The kayaks were slightly different, offered to a different type of consumer, but I've seen dropshipping used in a ton of different ways. it's it's a great way when leveraged correctly to get a competitive advantage over your competitors. It also allows retailers quick and efficiently test new product lines and brands, like we talked about earlier with the brands on the 3PL side. And then it enables brands and wholesalers to sell through more of their catalog. So even if you have a relationship as a brand with a retailer and they're buying your hot item and they're buying cases and packs of it and freight is just going out, you've got a new item that they're not really sure about. You can still, if you have a relationship, you can still put it on their website. You can still get promotion through them, and you can still sell through maybe not as popular as a brand or gain traction of a product that you might not be as popular. So something to think about there as well, where it's, yeah, sure, you're a traditional wholesaler. That's what I do. I sell wholesale to retailers. Well, when it comes to expanding your product line, Dropship can factor in and help you, build a better business, more comprehensive catalog. So ship from store and buy online, pick up in store, right? So it's kind of a different couple pieces here, but it really allows brick and mortar retailers to compete better with the online, the pure digital guys, right? The large pure digital guys. There's not a lot of them. Amazon is the first, and you see they're, with Whole Foods, they're becoming more of a mixed, and I think that's the future of all retail. Is it's somewhat of a mixed model for most of the large guys. But some of these brick and mortars, that it is a tough transition. I've been consulting brands and wholesalers and retailers for nearly a decade now, and I often see the brick and mortar have a tough time transitioning to retail, right? Or so to online retail, where the digital pure play digital retailer has a tough time getting access to the right brands, right? So it's a different game that they're playing, and it does allow the brick and mortars to leverage their physical space more, whether it's from the ship from store perspective, where if they can e-commerce enable their store, then you've got, whether it's location, it's closer, you've got just already staff that you don't have to have a warehouse or pay the pick, pack, and ship fee from a 3PL. You can almost have little micro fulfillment stores if you have multiple brick and mortars, depending on how large of a company you are. If you're like some of the, a larger retailer, you might have a West Coast and East Coast store, and if you can turn that into a micro fulfillment warehouse right out the back, then it's there's a lot of efficiency there. It decreases, and the big efficiencies, it decreases residential shipping costs and increases margin and upsell potential. So that's more of the buy online, pick up in store side of things. If you're not selling to residents, or not shipping to residents, and you're having them come in store, right? That is a huge potential there. And then it significantly decreases the return logistical challenges and costs. So pretty straightforward, right? They can come in, they feel more confident in buying online because they know they can return it directly to the store. On top of that, the cost of shipping it back and all of that kind of factored in, right? I'm sure a lot of people on this webinar today are like, well, that's great for the Targets of the world and things like that. But, I'm sure everyone here, if they're not already a growing business, you're aspiring to be a growing larger business. And, you may have a decision point where, do I get a brick and mortar? Do I set up, whether you're just a brand or a retailer, does it make sense to do it? Because you can leverage it in different ways. It's something to consider, right? There's a lot of added value in it, even if you are a pure play digital retailer today. It will help your digital business as well. So who faces this challenge of this new distributed fulfillment strategy, only being really implemented by the big boys, and the smaller retailers and brands kind of struggling to adjust to this new approach? Well, it's retailers for one, right? It's the retailers that are needing to compete with the Amazons of the world, Targets of the world. And like we talked about earlier, catalog size, reducing shipping costs and time. So, with that, the new challenges arise, like relying on suppliers to drop ship and cross stock. For those that are not familiar with cross stocking, we'll talk more about it, but it's essentially, bringing in inventory, just into your warehouse or your brick and mortar for a short period of time, where it's going right back out, whether it's being shipped out from your team quickly to the residents of the consumer, or if it's being picked up. You can almost assume it's being picked up in store as well. I don't think that's typically, you don't hear about it referred to in that way, but you can essentially think anytime you're bringing in a drop ship order or an order that is a single order into your own physical location, that's not going to be really stored and put away like a traditional supply chain where you would store, everything for sale. Next, that's essentially cross-docking. I'll show more on a diagram, but might make a little bit more sense. Syncing and trusting inventory quantities, right? So it's a new concept for retailers where they were always just buying cases and packs and putting them into their warehouse. They can turn around and see something on the shelf. So that's a big piece of it. Multi-source order orchestration sounds like a big fancy word, and it really kind of is big and fancy and complex, and it's really tough to do. It's tough to say I've got one product, right? I've got this T-shirt for sale, and this T-shirt is in my warehouse. It's in my brick and mortar. It's also available via a Dropship distributor. It's also It's also available via the brand directly. So, all that is very new, uncharted waters. Invoice payment management and returns management all factors in too, right? All new workflows. And then the brands on the same side, they also face new challenges. They have their retail partners who want to do all these things on the left-hand side here. They have the brands, they're asking them to do all this. So retail partners are saying, can you drop ship? Can you cross-dock? And you're saying, what does cross-dock even mean? So that means they have to accept daily POs. They're not used to accepting a PO every day for an item. They want quarterly or monthly POs for both dropshipping and cross-docking. Pricing products and providing inventory. So how do you price products now? You sell it, you've traditionally sold in case packs, and you're still doing that, but you're also drop shipping some. So how do I change the pricing? How do I factor that in? What's the right thing to do? What's the industry standard? Shipping and branding, packing slips, right? So just how do I ship off my account? Do I ship off their account? If they want me to ship off their account with a third party billing versus like sending me a label, how do I even get a branded packing slip in my current process? All that is new to brands. And then invoice payment, returns management, all the same, they face the same challenges. So I'll start with this kind of blank slate here, but you can kind of see the multi-source, approach here where, an order comes into an online retailer, there's a lot of options, a lot of logic that needs to go into how it actually gets back to the consumer. So if you think about it, this slide's all about how it affects retailers, and I've got my second slide here on how it affects brands. But from a retailer perspective, the second an order comes in from your online store, you've got a couple different things you need to think about. One, this item came in for a certain this order came in for a certain item. Where is it available? Where's the inventory? Was I displaying it properly on the website? Where am I shipping it to? What did they request when they checked out? What's the shipping method? And then you go into the highest margin option, right? So you look in your brick and mortar first. You look in your internal warehouse or third party warehouse, right? You might see option A is not available. Option B, it's out of stock there as well. Then you start moving on to looking at your dropship suppliers. Okay, they're both available, kind of signified by the green there. Dropship C has it, but Dropship D has a better margin. So I'm going to pick from Dropship D. So I've picked my fulfillment partner now, right? And I've factored in everything from the location, the cost of the item, the dropship fee, what the shipping method is that was requested, all of that. You can even have priorities, right? So that's all the kind of stuff that factors in, and you kind of need software to help you manage, which we'll talk about. But this is kind of what we're talking about when we say distributed order management, right? This is distributed order management. This is order orchestration. And it's basically what we're talking about when we talk about implementing a distributed fulfillment strategy. And then not only do you pick the supplier A, dropship supplier A, now you have the option, do I cross-dock it or do I direct dropship, right? A lot of times you might think, why would I ship it twice? Why would I ship it directly into my warehouse and then ship it on to the consumer's address? Why would I always directly dropship it? There's other things that come into play here, right? Bulk POs that are sent. Maybe you have multiple orders throughout a day, which you probably do, that are all going to go to that dropship supplier. They might not allow for dropship, right? But let's say in the scenario they do, you got two options. You may get a significant discount on the item, and the shipping might even be free if you're sending it to your warehouse, right? So you need to factor in that. It's all an equation and really an algorithm in the back end here it's helping you decide all these. And there's a ton of different inputs, as you can see, that depending on your business model and the actual order details can vary each time. It's just not able to be done manually at scale, and that's why you have distributed order management. And then lastly, right, updating the status, the supplier performance, or at least reporting on supplier performance, reconcile this invoice, right? So you might have cross-docked it where it's a bulk invoice, a bulk PO that needs an invoice in bulk back on this PO, or maybe it's an individual order that was dropship that needs an individual invoice to reconcile. There's a lot of new data management problems that you face here, but this is, it's proven that this is the better approach from a customer standpoint. Just looking at the Targets, the Amazons, the Walmarts of the world, it just takes a lot to get there, and we'll talk about how you can kind of bite that off in chunks as you go. So that's retail, right? Just kind of looking back at it, that's the main thing that you're going to see. We didn't really go through the inventory side. It's kind of inherent here and assumed, right, that you need to not only have the order orchestration working, the first thing that it's all predicated on is the inventory needs to be in sync. And we need to know exactly what the inventory is in there. In each one of those sources, it needs to be displayed. If you're doing a pickup in store, it needs to be displayed, and the options need to be there for you as well on your front end. Storefront, right, on your website. So inventory and order management is really what we're talking about. So from a brand perspective, they have a little bit different of a flow, but they still, there's still some complexity here. It's really them supporting that, right? They're a piece of this, and the DS Supplier A, let's assume that's a brand. Let's look at kind of from their side what they have to deal with. So, brand I've got here, they're typically used to, and a lot of new brands, which I think has been great for the industry, have went to direct to consumer and have either partnered with a third party or, have figured out how to ship out of their own, maybe started in the garage and moved on to their warehouse, but they're going direct to consumer now, first going to distributors or even retailers, and they know how to ship one or two, individual orders and high volume orders throughout the day. So that's great. That's its own flow though, right? It's very different from, a dropship flow where you're doing it on behalf of a retailer. I've got the wholesale line there, you can see, but I also have, these purple lines here are really what the retailer is requesting of the brand. So drop shipping, the difference here is that you typically, when you're selling direct to consumer, a consumer's checking out in your Shopify store or wherever, and it's automatically synced with the inventory you have on your Shopify store. That's automatically synced with your warehouse management system, right? And those pre-built connections exist. It's easy. It's simple. 90% of these, ERPs and WMSs and OMSs and whatever your acronym might be have that pre-built Shopify and BigCommerce sync. That's easy. The hard part is now working with third parties, right? Your partners, your retailers who want to drop ship, because the difference is they need to now have insight into your inventory. They're not going to go check your website every day to determine if you've got something in stock. They need an inventory feed. They need up-to-date inventory. They need, not only that, they need product data, and they need to know what their cost is. They need pricing files. So how do you get that to them, right? That's another piece of the equation. Automated order acceptance, right? So they're not going to go through, if you have a retail partner that wants you to drop ship for them, you might be set up on an EDI perspective on that blue line with the wholesale, right? You might be on SPS Commerce or True Commerce or some of those. That's fine. But if you have mid-tier retailers coming to you that don't want to go through a large, EDI provider, you have to figure out how to accept an order automatically, right? They might ask, hey, can I send one to you via API, or can I send you a dozen emails a day, or whatever it might be? You have to figure out, how can I get orders in, because they're not going to check out. Most of the guys that you want to work with are not going to be able to check out through a traditional D2C, consumer checkout if they're sending you hundreds or thousands of orders a day, obviously. And then the invoicing side comes into play, right? If you're not checking out via your website, how do you make sure you get paid? And then the branded packing slips, like I talked about. So all of those 5 things we've got there are all things that brands need to consider. And why really dropshipping has a bad name in the industry, because people are they don't want to do this, right? And it's a mix between, it's a low risk kind of startup model, but 30% of what Amazon is shipping to you as a consumer is dropship, right? It's a fulfillment model. If you can figure out how to implement the fulfillment model, it allows you to do those things that we talked about earlier on in this presentation, whether it's increasing catalog size, getting your foot in the door for, with retailers, like we talked about with brands, and just, being more efficient and having more in stock in general for a retailer. So that's kind of the brand side on what you see the challenges are, and what we consider they're feeling the challenges with distributor order management and those requests from the retailers. Oh yeah, and lastly, you also now need to consider, well, I need to add a third-party warehouse to support the East Coast, right? So, that's another addition there if you really want to compete in this day and age. So what to consider? So there's all these three pillars really of distributed fulfillment that we talk about being advantages, strategic, competitive advantages that you can implement one of them, you can implement all three of them. It's really up to you. I definitely would recommend implementing one at a time. But let's talk about evaluating what to consider if it's right for you. So if you're a brand and you're saying, I don't know if I want a 3PL or, does it make sense for me to do my own stuff out of my warehouse? Really look at it and say, will it help me start drop shipping and win retailer deals? You might not be able to drop ship today. You might have you and yourself or you and your, one or two other employees, and they can easily ship out bulk case packs, but you say no to drop shipping because it just doesn't make sense for you, right? Can you make it make sense? And what does that do downstream? Can you win more deals with larger retailers? You might not be hearing a ton of the larger guys asking for it right now. I'm sure you're hearing a ton from the mid-tier guys. But as this picks up, as online becomes more of a digital first kind of approach for the mid and higher end retailers who are not, putting a bunch of money in their department stores or anything like that, you're going to hear drop shipping more. I believe Macy's is like 100% drop ship now on their website. I know Nordstrom is really pushing it, with their platform. But think about that, right? Rethink drop ship and how you can leverage 3PLs. What decrease in shipping times and rates can I gain? What new markets can I reach? A lot of times it can be more expensive to go to a 3PL because of the type of product you've got, the order volume you have. The pick, pack, and ship fees might not make sense, but they do have discounted rates. They are going to help you with shipping times. That's usually the reason why you're going to go there. Especially if you already have a warehouse and you're doing it strategically to add one on another coast or whatever. So you really have to see what's the long-term ROI on doing this. It might not make sense on a per order now today, but if I get stuff to people in 2 days, 3 days, whatever, if I can enter new markets, does it make sense for me long-term? You might have to take a little leap of faith there on that. And then the rates, you might save money, right? Just because of their bulk buying rates. It really depends on the company and your situation. And then, obviously factor in the pick, pack fees, storage costs, all the sell-through rates that you have. So when you're evaluating dropship fulfillment, right, I would definitely say start with you might have 15 vendors you work with. This is obviously talking from a retailer perspective that you're considering. I would say, who are my top one or two? Let's start the process of evaluating what it would be like to dropship with them. Let's look at them. Let's use them as like a test case to say, how would we start working with, these vendors? And then really the next question you need to ask is, and you probably have to ask them, how will we connect from an inventory quantity perspective? How do I get my costs? How often my costs change? Will they be updated automatically? How do I send you orders? What are all the options? How do I get invoices? And then based on their answers, is that reliable? Do you feel good? I know larger retailers that we have on our platform that, their vendors are mixed between EDI, which is super reliable and it syncs all day, every day. And then the same retailer is working with other vendors who say, we'll upload stuff via the vendor portal for you, and they just can't rely on that person to actually go and upload a spreadsheet every day, right? So it all depends on the vendors. Know that you're going to have a mix of both in most scenarios. And, depending on, we talk about this a lot, the power of the relationship between the brand and the retailer, or the supplier in general and the retailer, what are they going to be willing to do for you versus what are they going to require you to do? You should have those conversations with one or two of your vendors and really get a feel for if it makes sense for your model. And then, you'll want to talk through the returns and the refunds and all that. From the ship to store and buy online, the first thing to make an e-commerce enabled, do you have somewhere to pick, pack, and ship? And what's the staffing? Can you really leverage the staffing? A lot of this stuff's kind of common sense. I'll kind of blow through it. But, the big thing that's worth mentioning here is I'm assuming that most of the companies I talk to every day are mid-tier, middle market, doing a couple $1 million a year, maybe $10 million, maybe, something like that. We're not talking to a lot of the Amazons of the world, right? There's a top 1% of retailers out there. And so if you think about it, you're on a budget when it comes to this technology. You're coming to a piece of software to save money, to make things more efficient. a lot of times you want to leverage what you already have. No one really wants to roll out a huge new ERP and wants to roll out all this technology for the sake of technology. If you can make it make sense and you can do a crawl, walk, run approach, integrating directly into your POS can make a lot of sense. And I think I've seen a lot of people do it where if they want to be able to see what's in stock in their different locations, they can integrate directly into a POS system and look at it and not only pull inventory, but also place orders. So that's what I've seen most commonly as an easy, quick way to be able to become a ship from store kind of retailer. The buy online, pick up in store is a little bit tougher to do. And that's kind of my third point. You really do need more front end work. So, if you're on a Shopify store, getting this implemented is not the easiest thing. There's not like, at least my knowledge, but if you guys seen it out there, ping me something in the chat, a quick way to just have, here's what's available at location X, Y, and Z, right? It takes a lot more that goes into it. It's more of a back end system like our, Flxpoint to allow to get that inventory up, to be able to put that data, associate the multi-location data with Shopify, which I know they have the concept of locations, but just in general, getting that from point A, which is where it's actually located in the inventory that's on hand, versus displaying it on the website, and then showing the shipping costs and all that. It's not usually an easy, just install an app and you're good to go. So think about that. What's it look like from a performance perspective on your website? How does it affect the experience? What's it going to cost you to develop it? That will really help you consider, does it make sense to do buy online, pick up in store, or not? Ship from store is a much easier way to implement. You just can add them as a source in your distributor or manager system and, start pulling inventory from a POS integration. Cool. See some more questions coming through. I appreciate it. Some good ones that we'll have towards the end here. Okay, so I guess my next thing here was, I see some people raising their hand. I'll make sure everyone can hear me fine, I'm assuming. Looks like I think we're good here. Okay. Yeah, okay, I think we're good. So the three pillars that we've got here, what to consider. That all sounds great. That's fine, right? But you go, okay, well, I just need to implement software to help me do this. That's probably the next logical thought. Well, you really need to look at kind of what it is, right? It's distributed order management software. What are you really concerned with? If you think about it, it's really understanding, one, how many vendors and sources that you're going to actually be pulling inventory from. What's the different file formats that you think you'll need to be pulling in? What systems, like, are you connecting to a WMS? Are you connecting to an API via your third-party warehouse? And are you connecting directly into a POS system for your brick and mortars, right? So when you're evaluating them, and I'll talk more about this, you need to think about these connections first. What is already pre-built for the distributor order management, the DOM software that you're looking at? And I would definitely recommend starting with one of these to start, right? Like, this is basically the 3PL side of things. Here's your, buy online, pick up in store, or ship from store. And then here's kind of more of your drop ship connections. I would pick one of those three and see what did it take to get connected in, because you're going to need on-hand inventory quantities and costs. A lot of times if you're just implementing dropship for the first time, it might feel a little weird that you'd never see or touch the item and you don't bring it in-house. So you're going to need to start thinking about how do I get product data up to my store. And the rest is kind of self-explanatory. Tracking, invoice information, right? New orders, the taxes, the fees, all that data needs to flow back and forth. And then in the middle, you need to have that visibility of inventory across multiple sources. You're able to manage that, even manipulate it, right? Even change the quantity because you want a buffer or you want, something there to actually change the physical quantity to something else virtually, and how it's displayed online. The order orchestration I showed earlier and optimizing that. And then the vendor onboarding reporting. The reason I showed this slide here is because most of the software you're evaluating and on is probably not doing any of this and doing it very well, right? Or it's only doing a couple pieces of this, because a lot of this software that you're on today is built for the traditional model. And that's why we talk about traditional supply chain versus distributed fulfillment. Is traditional supply chain does not have these issues. These are new challenges that you have to face for the benefit of all the stuff I talk about. So quarterly buying of bulk freight, orders placed over email, phone, a checkout process, and long EDI implementations. That's what traditional supply chain is and what the software was built for. Very simple. It's very hard to go from a traditional supply chain like what you see when you go and search inventory and order management for e-commerce, right? Any of those top people that show up, they were built for the I warehouse my own inventory. I buy it in bulk quarterly and I send it to my Shopify store. It's tough to bolt on distributed fulfillment workflows. It's tough to bolt on high volume daily orders and the syncing that goes into that. The orders placed over multiple disparate systems, smaller one-to-one frequent invoices between trading partners. The shift in inventory ownership, that's a big piece in general because product data is usually not an issue. If you're buying everything in-house, you're looking at it, you're taking a picture of it, you're doing things in a very manual one-off base where you're adding it directly to your Shopify BigCommerce store, and then you're syncing back to your warehouse or vendor, whatever it might be. You're not loading in large amounts of products and data that's constantly changing, right? So they're not really built for that, the traditional inventory and order management systems. And then you're not really, the smaller trading partners too. So the vendor onboarding and all that, they don't really have those built in, knowing that there's AR risk as you bring on smaller trading partners and more in high volume. It's easier to build a system around this and the new model of fulfillment and then allow for things like transfer orders and like bulk POs and, a B2B checkout. That part's easy. The hard part is all of this because it's so, it's intensive. It's data intensive. It's integration intensive across multiple disparate integration points. And there's a lot that goes into the processing of it and the accuracy of it. So you're going to be disappointed with a lot of the traditional supply chain or traditional inventory and order management. And that's really why we built Flxpoint, is to support this new way of distributed order management. So to kind of help you evaluate it, like I said, I didn't put any logos up here. I'm not going to try to claim because every software platform is evolving and changing, and it's tough to speak to who does what well. But think about these kinds of questions as you look for, if you decide that distributed order management at some point is going to make sense for you, and you want a system to scale up to that eventually. There's 3 different pillars. Like I said, I'll kind of go through how you evaluate each one, and look at this, evaluate the software at least for being compatible with this strategy. So what a lot of these guys do have down are it's easy to just build a pre-built integration with a 3PL, right? So that I will say, if you plan on just doing a 3PL and selling on Shopify and selling on Amazon, most of the big names you find out there in inventory and order management are going to work for you. That's fine. As long as you don't have specific data that you want to transfer that's not in that pre-built vanilla integration. We've actually done consulting work and built integrations on top of the pre-built, or at least in place of the pre-built integration that a platform already had. When the platform and the 3PL were offering to do it for free, we charged a consulting fee. And they went with us because they wanted to get done right. They wanted to make sure the data was going in the places it needed to be, and it was past the what you would think of like a pre-built just kind of out of the box integration. So it is good to have it to start there. If you do have a platform or you do have a 3PL that you picked out in mind, having that integration pre-built is great. But then definitely look at it. Look at the integration, any data you get behind it. Talk to a solution engineer, and run through some scenarios, right? Because we've seen issues with people who aren't able to get country of origin, and they needed that to come through to their ERP or OMS from the 3PL, or they needed the components of like a kit or a bundle didn't really map up properly, and if you sent an order, it wasn't going to map and split the order up properly. There's little things like that I would run through order scenarios to really vet that integration. Even though it's pre-built, it might not work for you. And a lot of these guys have moved to pulling their pricing off and just, selling you before you can actually, get a free trial or a demo or anything or at least a trial or kick the tires. So look at that. Also look at the API, try, like I said, you might not be the most technical person, but work with the team to figure that out on what's available and what you may or may not need to pass from a data perspective. Think about your unique needs. And then if you do need customization, have that conversation with your 3PL and your ERP or OMS, right? Or if you go with someone like a distributed order management system, right? So have that discussion, see what it takes. So the drop shipping side, if you are saying, you know what, the 3PL doesn't make sense to me, I'm more of a, I want to get focused on drop shipping, you know, what you'll need to be focused on there to start is adding drop ship vendors. What is self-service versus custom fee? As you look at a DOM system or just a traditional, you know, traditional inventory and order management, they are really not good at this part. The drop shipping has side of things is a whole new workflow. The transaction between trading partners does not really, it's very tough. Almost all will admit it. They'll say, we left drop shipping to other people. And that's where we come in. But the problem is that to make it part of your flow, you kind of need to have it all managed in one place. So I will say, if you're interested in drop shipping, dig in on how do you integrate new vendors? What's the onboarding process look like? What do you have to pay for each time versus, you know, like in Flxpoint, we've got this self-service tool where you can easily connect into the majority of vendors you work with, which is a CSV file, and easily kind of pull that in, whether it's email and, you know, if it's a Dropbox file or whatever it might be. Look at that, understand the total cost of ownership, right, of this software platform. And if it's not a file and you need to integrate API and EDI and all that stuff with your vendors, what's the fee look like and what's the team look like? Ask about who's on their team, right? What's their experience there? You can definitely ask that. If you're not going to get straight answers there, it's probably not the right team for you and the right product if you're drop shipping. How are my unique inventory? So look at your inventory and order workflows, make sure that they're supported, fully vet that. And then this is the big part that gets missed a lot. You know, how are your vendors supported? So you might have a dozen vendors that are mom and pop shops, small brands, whatever it might be, and you might need help with getting them on board and talking the tech talk and, you know, helping consult them on it. You know, a lot of these software platforms that they're not willing to do it, or it's an extra fee or whatever, you know, ask, hey, will my account manager, will they actually help my vendors if I loop them into an email and you know, support them? You know, that's something to help you evaluate as well, because that's a big piece of it. And last part of that was, what's their experience, right? Do they have a vendor portal? Not all these platforms are going to have a place that your vendors can log in, right? So that's going to save you time and money if they can log in and view orders and details. Ship from store, pre-bill integration with my store OMS, pretty table stakes there, right? Is a pre-bill that makes things easy. The shipping label generation process, this is really about what happens when I do get an order into my POS system. Like, how do I, or, you know, is there a way that I can now generate a label? Like, if I'm going to e-commerce enable my store and start shipping out of it, like, what's that process look like? You know, is my new shipping order management software, like, can it just pull in the POS information and manage the orders there as far as inventory, pull in the POS inventory and manage the orders there? And then print a label, you know, just really walk through that workflow. It's going to be evaluated based on what you're using for in-house inventory and order management in your store, and what DOM or, you know, traditional inventory management system you pick. The buy online portion, this is a big thing. Is there an API or is there an ability to expose the actual location inventory, right? So a lot of times that's take it for granted. You just might assume, of course, I'm going to know what the inventory is on each location, but to get it from location on that left-hand side of the diagram we show all the way to, you know, the front end and the visitor on your website seeing that actual quantity, can you get that there if you have to custom build it or whatever? Is that data point exposed? It's a big question to ask. And then, you know, really how easy is it to get that even exposed in the first place? Like I said, it can be tough sometimes. It's not a simple app. So, you know, what integrations are there to show that and support that from a website perspective? Cool. All right. So we got done with 10 minutes left, which is perfect because we got some questions here. That is the presentation, guys. So if you do have any more questions, please add them in. I will start answering a couple that came through as I was talking. I've got my email there. Feel free to email me. I will, you know, respond to everyone, at least get you in touch with anyone that, you know, whether it's a solution consultant on our side or whatever it might be. Feel free to email me. Also go to the contact form. If you want to see a demo, just go in and hit contact us. We'll get you in touch with someone to give you a demo of Flxpoint. Which I said, like I said earlier, is built for this. If you are planning on distributed order management and implementing this fulfillment strategy, that's exactly what we built Flxpoint for. So first question, how do you determine shipping costs and still make a profit as a new retailer? So the big thing here, if I have a diagram So looking at this, and I've got a better diagram for it, but just to stay in the presentation, if you look at the dropship supplier, right, they do provide a lot of the larger ones, distributors at least, and even the smaller ones, you can ask them to provide you an invoice. And that's really, it's a different flow now where every single order you send, it might be one individual e-commerce order from your consumer is now mapped to one individual purchase order to your dropship supplier, which is then mapped to one individual invoice from your supplier from a reconciliation and accounting standpoint, right? And so that's why it's so different from traditional where it's like, wow, there's really one PO to one invoice for every single e-commerce order. That's kind of how it works. That is how it works. You can obviously bubble that up into larger statements and reports, but that's how you can reconcile. It charged me this much on my Amazon account, my Seller Central account with fees and everything. Here's how much I received for that order from my consumer. Here's how much it cost me to now send a purchase order. Here's my purchase order I sent, and that purchase order should reconcile back with an invoice you get from your supplier. And with that, once you get that, Flxpoint, this is one of the big things we wanted to solve because that's one of the number one questions we've heard over the last 15 years is like, how do I even know if I'm profitable? I'm not getting an invoice for another couple of days after, maybe even a week after. We have the ability to automatically import invoices. If it's a CSV, it automatically imports in the same way we pull an inventory. If it's a PDF, we work with a third-party service that's an additional fee, but they can even convert PDFs. And we have a report that we call the profitability report, because it's super unique and creative naming, but it allows you to see the actual cost and the profitability across that whole chain of things. So it's not easy. We had to build the platform just for it, and we were running US Direct. We had no idea how people ran their business. We had all these crazy spreadsheets, and it really helped us build out the Flxpoint features. I hand selected my inventory from various suppliers. How do I factor shipping costs from all over? So hand select inventory from various suppliers. Okay, so if you hand select, that's great. And as far as shipping costs, so we have a couple different ways when it comes to shipping costs to factor that in. You have your shipping costs that you set on you have your shipping price, I guess, on your Shopify store, Magento, BigCommerce, whatever, on your platform. Let's say it's free shipping because you've got plenty of margin in these, just to make it simple. You've got plenty of margin in these products. You don't need to charge shipping. You want to make it free and easy to check out, right? So an order comes in, now you have a shipping cost, right? Your supplier doesn't care what you charge on your website. Their cost of the shipping that they're going to charge you is separate from that. And it could be from multiple different suppliers. You might have one order that now needs to go to supplier A and also route a purchase order to supplier B. We do a couple things. One, we can integrate. We have an integration with Ship Engine, which is in the back end. It's the ShipStation's API to rate shop and give you a cost estimate and really send one to the cheapest supplier and two just with the cheapest rate. So you can factor that in, and you can use our rate shopping is what we call it to kind of integrate with the carrier rates. So that helps you right there. Secondly, once you actually do, depending on how you ship, right? You might ship from your own carrier and then we integrate, with UPS or whatever to get the actual cost. But if your supplier, which in a lot of cases they are shipping off their account, a lot of the larger distributors at least are shipping off their account, then you're getting charged for shipping later. That one, you'll have to just understand who is, what's their policy to have flat rate? Is it after the fact? And if they charge you after the fact, which a lot of the large distributors do, you just have to kind of wait and see what the average charges are. And that's what the invoice reconciliation is about, right? They're going to put the shipping costs on the invoice. We're going to pull it in. You're going to be able to look at the profitability report and determine if it's profitable or not, and filter down from a ton of different criteria. But hopefully that answered your question, because there's a lot of different ways and a lot of different factors in there. But in general, that it can be accomplished in one of many different ways, and at least to get close to understand what the shipping is going to be. Alrighty, so if you were drop shipping several different products, kinds of products, would you recommend to have several drop shippers or focus on one or a limited amount of drop suppliers? So, the split order scenario I talked about earlier is not ideal, right? It's not ideal to pay for shipping twice on one single order. So if you can find a large, here's the issue that people face. You can find a large distributor of a large catalog. That's usually the best from a shipping perspective if you plan on having multiple items on an order, right? If someone plans on checking out from your store with multiple items that might go to two different locations, it's good to have that come from one place and one shipping label. And it's a good experience to have it come in one box. It's also very rare to find a distributor that has a super large catalog when you're across several different kinds of products, like you said. That's going to have much margin, right? You're going to have the best margin by working directly with smaller brands or smaller, niche wholesalers. That's the benefit, right? That's the benefit of the distributor, is that they give you that access to all the large catalog. It ships from one warehouse. But then they take all that in margin. So it's really kind of just sort of evaluate. I would say this much. I like the idea of distributors, starting with a distributor, large one, whatever, getting that dialed in, getting the flow that we're showing here dialed in. And then from there, starting to source from brands, right? Getting your sales up, seeing what people are buying, all that kind of stuff. And then you can move on to smaller brands and you can negotiate the shipping with them because you already have sales. Not only that, you know what sells, right? You've got a market for a certain product. You've got the data, and you can start bringing those products in-house that sell more often. And that's part of the process of optimizing, not only from just like an order orchestration perspective, but just your business in general and buying wholesale what you know you can sell. All right. Looks like those are the questions we've got for right now. All righty. So we are going to be sending a recording out, guys. Looks like super great attendance. I love seeing as many people show up for our webinars. A lot of people stayed all the way through. Looks like we had double at the end than what I saw when I first got started. So a lot of people joined. We'll send this out. We'll have it. You guys know where to find us if you're interested in a demo. Last thing I will say is that we are probably going to be partnering with one of our WMS providers to do another in-depth, like tactical, how to set up distributed order management, all the way from using Flxpoint to the warehouse management system to even connecting with a 3PL. I do plan on having something more along those lines, so we'll send out some more information, so be on the lookout for that. Besides that, feel free to ping us with any questions. Happy to answer anything that you guys have. Thanks again for joining.